Trump, Netanyahu, and the Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously, that's something that you give to somebody who ends wars, prevents other wars from starting, or brings ones that are fighting to a reasonable end. That's the terms that are being tossed around here in the midst of these horrific wars that continue to go on in the Middle East. The pause, and I don't even say a ceasefire, between the war between Israel and Iran, which also kind of included the United States. There's been a pause in the fighting, but none of the conditions have been even addressed, much less solved. So not real clear how we're talking about the Nobel Peace Prize, how that's even in the conversation here, but it's kind of a weird world, and it is. And so we're going to have to address it because that's what's being talked about. And we got nobody better to talk about this today, especially on stuff with the Middle East, than former CIA analyst Larry Johnson, the commander at sonar21.com. I just added that in there, by the way. And also the son of New American Revolution on substack.com. Larry, welcome back to the show as always. Loving your shirt, by the way. You really did well today.
I've been inspired. I saw it at the Florida sunset.
That's really nice, man, actually. Well, listen, just before we even start getting into these clips, and you've seen some of what we're going to use, and I know you're going to have some things to say, but let's just look at that whole Peace Prize thing. How's that even in the conversation?
We are witnessing the transformation of Donald Trump into Kim Jong-un. Because he is. I have never seen this level of ass kissing going on. It's Olympic in its proportions. Where Bibi Netanyahu's really laying it on thick. Oh, I've written a nomination for you, and others have written a nomination for him. And as you correctly note, where's the peace? I'm going to bring peace to Ukraine in 24 hours. And then when they gets confronted on that, I was just kidding. Don't you understand sarcasm? I never meant that. Yeah, we're 6 months in, and what am I doing now? I'm sending more weapons to Ukraine. Oh, yeah, that sounds like a peaceful act. I've dropped, 14 of the largest bombs the United States makes short of a nuclear weapon on Iran. That's peaceful. We're enabling the genocide in Gaza. That's peaceful. But you know what? I wouldn't put it past the Nobel Prize Committee that as long as Trump continues to surrender to the deep state, as long as he continues to, and we haven't even talked about Jeffrey Epstein. What client list? There's no client list.
No, it's on my desk, says Pam Bondi. Oh, yeah. Wait a minute.
No, it disappeared. So, you look at one thing after another. As long as Trump now appears to be willing to do what the deep state wants, that's what it appears to be. So, it's for those, unfortunately, I supported the man, and my support is over. I think he's got to the stage where he ought to be impeached, candidly, justifiably so. It's disturbing to watch him say and do the things that he does. And Medvedev today pointed out, he was making fun of Trump. He goes, "Oh, Trump said he had a marvelous conversation with Putin." And now he says, "Oh, he really is disappointed. He's upset with Putin." And then he said he cut off arms to Ukraine, and now he's restarting arms to Ukraine. He says it's like watching a seesaw on crack. Boop, 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 up and down.
Well, it's kind of hard to argue with that. Especially when you kind of put it in those terms. It's just kind of a bizarro 1984-ish world playing out in front, and it's just so hard. I'm being honest. It's hard to cognitively get your head around because, like the movie 1984 from the book by George Orwell, if you've ever watched it, I remember when I watched it the first time, it's like, well, that would never happen in real life. That's so far beyond the pale. Obviously, the people would figure it out. And then now, Larry, we're living it.
Yeah. Complete delusion. Remember, like, hey, we're going to be talking to Iran. Iran wants to have peace talks next week. That was 2 weeks ago. And Iran said, we're not even sure there's anything to talk about because we can't trust the United States. Because the last time we were supposed to have peace talks with them, they bombed us.
Yeah, and they did it again. That's
Yeah.
exactly how it happened. We'll get into some of that in a minute, especially this issue of trust in Iran. But the first one I want to look at here is something that at that meeting there that Gary was showing you a picture of a second ago, last night in the White House, is that Netanyahu was asked, and when there was a reporter question at first, they started off by asking about this new New York mayoral candidate that beat Cuomo for the Democratic primary, Mamdani, I think his name is, and a lot of things she's been talking about. And one of the things she said was that he was claimed that Mamdani said that if he wins and Netanyahu goes to New York, that he will have him arrested because of the charges that are already on the books for international the International Criminal Court, I think it is, for genocide, etc.
Right.
So they asked him about that, and at first he just dismissed it and said, "Oh, he's a clown," blah blah blah. But then he answered a question that is on the minds of a lot of people, and that is on how this war with Gaza can even come to an end. And by the way, just as a precursor, the president is trying to, and so is Israel, to trying to expand the Abraham Accords. And one of the key blocks in there, if not the key, is Saudi Arabia, that they want to normalize relations with Israel. Saudi Arabia said they're interested in that, but only, and they have been emphatic about this, if there is a two-state solution, a solution for the Palestinian people. That's what they said. Now, here then is what Netanyahu said last night about a two-state solution.
You know, after October 7th, people said the Palestinians had a state, Hamas state in Gaza, and look what they did with it. They didn't build it up, they built down into bunkers, into terror tunnels, after which they massacred our people, raped our women, beheaded our men, invaded our cities and our towns and our kibbutzim, and did horrendous massacres, the kind of which we didn't see since World War II and the Nazis, the Holocaust. So people aren't likely to say, let's just give them another state, it'll be a platform to destroying Israel. We'll work out a peace with our Palestinian neighbors, those who don't want to destroy us, and we'll work out a peace in which our security, the sovereign power of security, always remains in our hands. Now people will say it's not a complete state, it's not a state, it's not that. We don't care. You know, we vowed never again. Never again is now. It's not going to happen again.
A lot to unpack there, but I want to start with the end there where he said, you know, a lot of people are saying, oh, there's no Palestinian state. I said, yeah, I don't care. So where can we go if your start position is, I don't care what anybody else thinks, we're going to do what we want?
Yeah, no, their mission is to exterminate the Palestinians. You know, and the real irony here is that, let's look at genetic testing. The genetic testing shows that the Palestinian people have more in common genetically with the original inhabitants of what we now call Israel and the West Bank in Palestine than do these European interlopers like, Mr. Polish there, Netanyahu, changes his name, but is Mielikowski or something. But he's Polish. He's not Israeli. So, you get these Europeans that come in, and what they've shown, everything that he said there was a lie. It is not the Israelis that have been murdered wantonly.
And
it's the Palestinians.
The term he used.
Yeah, and beheading Israeli men. No, that's what Israel's been doing to the Palestinians. And we got caught with that. They pushed the lie that the Hamas had killed 40 babies. It was absolutely not true. Haven't found the name of a single child that was supposedly murdered by Hamas. But when you go into the actual stats about Palestinian terrorism, it's just the opposite. Very, very few Israelis have been killed in comparison to the tens of thousands. It's actually more than 100,000 now, just in the last 23 months in Gaza. So but this is a narrative that the West falls for, because when you step back and objectively look at the total number of terrorist attacks, the facts are pretty stunning. That you've had a total of 1,552 Israelis killed at the hands of Palestinian terrorism. I'll repeat that. 1,552 killed from August of 2000 through April of 2024. 25 years, 1,552. The Israelis are killing right now that many Palestinians a week. It's just, I mean, it is a level of genocide that we're witnessing, and the world stays silent.
You know, that's one of the things that has, as you certainly can see, has animated me so much over the last couple of years, is that, and he said it again here. He said, you know, that when we say never again, we mean never again, and we remember the Holocaust. And I'm like going, do you? Because it's playing out, not just playing out in front of our eyes on a massive scale. Not the 6 million. It's not that scale, but that doesn't matter. When you're talking a population, a total population of 200 or 2 million that's captured in the Gaza Strip, this number, and there's a Harvard study that suggests the number could probably be closer to 370,000, not just the whatever it is, the current one that the Hamas people are saying it's around 70, I think. Probably it's a whole lot more than that, and that sounds to reason. But that number in percentage-wise is huge. And of course, when you have literally wiped out the possibility of having any kind of a life inside the Gaza Strip, they're reduced to just existing right now. That is as horrific as anything that can be imagined. And yet the vast majority of the world, and certainly the Western world, doesn't think about never again. Apparently, it only results with the Jews who live in Israel, and it doesn't apply to anyone else in the world. And that's just hard for me to understand how people with just basic humanity aren't even torn. Larry, if you could say that they say, well, we really like the Israelis, but golly, this stuff that's going on with the Palestinians here, I'm really torn. They're not even torn, most people. They're just like, sure, whatever the Israeli side does. How do you account for that?
Yeah, well, I think it's caught up in religion. Unfortunately, the Zionist mythology that has been pushed, that according to the Bible, the Holy Scriptures, as you know, many who embrace that believe, that it says that, as Ted Cruz said the other night with Tucker, hey, I ran for Senate because I wanted to defend Israel. They go, what? What about defending America for starters? But then he said, the Bible says that we're commanded to support Israel. Wait a second. Yeah, not only does it not say that.
Right. Yeah. I want to emphasize that the Bible does not say that we have to defend Israel. Does not say it,
but people have come to believe that. And that's what you believe ends up determining a lot of what you do. And therefore, you got the likes of Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel. It's just saying, he doesn't recognize Palestinians. They have no right to be there. This is all Israel's land, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, these ultra-Orthodox Jews, and maybe ultra-Orthodox is the wrong term to use, but the Ben Gavirs, the Smotrich, they believe that the Bible actually tells them that God has given them permission to kill Amalek. Netanyahu himself used that term. Yeah. And the Amalek were these people other than the Hebrews that were being described in there. And they had God's permission to kill them. So, hey, you can't figure out which God is God in this book. Because on the one hand, it says, thou shalt not kill. And then God says, never mind. You guys can go kill whoever you want. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend the religious out there, but if you can't recognize that kind of contradictory crap and say, hey, there's something wrong here. Either God says don't kill, or God says go kill the children and the women and the men, and it's okay. Sounds to me like they're two different gods talking.
Well, he does distinguish between an individual taking that prerogative and something that God has. But yeah, I don't want to get into a theological issue here. But the point being that it's ironic, if not perverse, that a lot of these folks, and it sounds like Senator Cruz there might need to go back and read a little bit more carefully, because you have the whole of 1st and 2nd Kings talking about how every single king of the Israeli kingdom in the north we're all bad and evil and wicked, and we're judged by God because of their wickedness.
Yeah.
So there was definitely no case that you had to defend the Israeli leadership because God didn't. So we could start there, but again, I don't want to get into a Bible study here. Sorry about that.
Sunday school, but
let's get back to some of the other parts here. Let's go to now Jack Keane, who wants to explain to everybody how Iran was militarily defeated.
Obviously, a major strategic change in the Middle East, certainly resulting from Iran's military defeat in the 12-day war by Israel, and President Trump and the United States decisively supporting the strike on Iran's nuclear program, which sets that program back for years. That really is the backdrop what's taking place here. And you add to that Hamas and Hezbollah being decimated, the United States pushing back on the Houthis and reopening international traffic on the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, and the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria. What we're really seeing being played out right before our eyes is a new strategic framework for the Middle East, which will likely lead to normalization of relationships with Israel and many of the countries in the Middle East.
What world is he talking about? I mean, first of all, we don't know at all if the Iranian program has been set back years. We don't even know. I'm not sure the Iranians know for sure, at least on what may have happened under the ground. But let's just key on the second one, because I know this is something you talk about a lot, that the Red Sea has been cleared. Did he not look at that? Was from this morning. Did he not see the news that yesterday there was a ship sunk by the Houthis in the Red Sea?
Yeah, they've actually, there have been two sunk this week. One that the Houthis sunk, the other one the Houthis took over, and then the Israelis bombed it and it sunk. So,
I missed that one.
Yeah, so there's he's certainly not paying attention, but it was reflective in this guy. How did he become a general? I really don't get it. To be this out of touch with reality. And maybe that's what it takes to become a general, that you'll kiss anyone's rear end and tell any lie that you need to get ahead. That's the message I'm getting from this.
Well, he's at the study for the Institute for the Study of War, whatever, where they have a lot of good analysts, by the way. A lot of their information is actually quite good. It's their analysis that's just terrible. But they know what's going on. So there is, in my view, there is no chance that he doesn't know that we don't even know if the program's been pushed back a year. We had Grossi claim maybe a few months. U.S. intelligence said the same thing, and that Hamas is definitely has been severely harmed, but they are still quite viable, as we see now after nearly 2 years of war. And this whole issue in the Red Sea, I mean, you can't possibly make any claim that he doesn't know that there were two ships that were captured and sunk this week. So that can only leave the alternative that he's trying to push a narrative irrespective of whether it's true or not, and it's not in this case. And that's but troubling by its own cats.
Well, if you noticed Hamas, he said, "Oh yeah, they've been defeated." Yeah, really? They've hit the Israelis in the last 5 days, 6 days with two ambushes that have caused more than 30 casualties, several KIA as well as severely wounded. That sounds like they're really down and out. The fact of the matter is that Israel, despite all of its military advantages, both with having armor, artillery, having more manpower, having power, of course, and then having a logistics supply line, having air, combat air, close air support, helicopters. Despite all of those advantages, here we are, what is it now, 21 months into this war, and Israel has not been able to defeat Hamas. They failed. And in fact, Hamas continues to attack. As some of us said at the outset, once Israel started blowing up those buildings and creating all that rubble, they turned it into Stalingrad, which is one of the reasons the Germans lost Stalingrad, because they created natural cover and concealment for the Russian forces to move around it. And that's exactly what Hamas is doing. So these Israelis don't know where they're getting hit. And then on top of it, the Israeli army, these reservists are suffering. There's a lot of PTSD. In fact, just the other day, I saw this one Israeli soldier had gone out on a fishing trip and set himself on fire, burned himself to death. And he left a note behind saying that he could not get the images out of his mind of the women and children that he had killed.
Oh, more. I missed that too.
Yeah. So this is, if anybody thinks this is the help in Israel, it's not. And it's, you've got, many of the Israelis with conscience they're beginning to suffer from this. So, Jack Kane, he lives in an alternate universe, but, he's saying, I guess, what he thinks he needs to say to get paid.
Yeah, I think it's as clear as that. I can't think of any other plausible reason. Okay, well, staying in the realm of disconnected from reality, let's go back to the Netanyahu and Trump love fest, because now then, and then we mentioned this at the top of the show, the guy who has the President Trump, who has supported and supplied all the weapons that Israel needs to continue to kill everybody in the Gaza Strip every day, and now increasingly in the West Bank. He continues to, and now has turned back on a lot of the weapons to keep the war in Ukraine going instead of using that leverage to bring it to an end. This is the guy who clearly deserves a Nobel Peace Prize.
Not only the letter that Netanyahu gave President Trump about the nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize, but also that statement where President Trump said, "I'm stopping wars, knowing what's on the horizon lying ahead."
Not only is he putting an end to wars, he's redrawing the lines of stability and peace in the Middle East. We saw that in the first Trump administration with the Abraham Accords, with, for the first time in decades, many nations recognizing the fundamental right of Israel to exist and working together cooperatively for peace and prosperity. And now, combined with the work that Israel did on the ground in Iran and the President Trump's bold decision to go after the nuclear sites in Tehran, we can see Iran on its back foot and the region more peaceful and more stable.
The region more peaceful and more stable. Ending the war? I mean, that... This is a lot for one show to talk about, to show people so disconnected from obvious ground truth reality. What do you make of it?
Mike Pompeo's auditioning to get back into the Trump administration. That's what was going on there. Because remember, Trump, at the outset when they were putting the cabinet together, they made it clear we don't want Pompeo anywhere near this. And in fact, I think they revoked his clearances. They took his clearances away as well. Maybe they didn't. But boy, when I see Pompeo sucking up the Trump like that all that tells me is there's a job opening somewhere in the Trump administration, and Pompeo's auditioning. Because, hey, Mr. President, you need me to shine your rear end? I'll be happy to do so. I've got this big tube of chapstick. I'll just be, kiss, 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 kiss. That's what was going on. Because again, Pompeo's he's not somebody that is uneducated. He's at least, he graduated from West Point. He was, he served as director of the CIA and State Department. He's at least got some minimal mental capacity to function. But again, just to spin the world like this and to make these things up and talk about Trump as a peacemaker. Again, that's the narrative that's being promoted. And I can't help but beginning to believe that the deep state has sort of figured out all they got to do is just blow smoke up Trump's skirts, and man, he'll love you forever. And as long as you don't push back and tell him he's wrong, as long as you tell him he's great, Mr. President, that's magnificent. That's why I draw the parallel with Kim Jong-un. You got this cult of personality in North Korea where everybody, oh, you're the greatest. That's what Trump wants.
And one of the worst elements in that one soundbite that we showed there was him talking about the bold decision to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. The nuclear weapons program they didn't have, right, that our intelligence said they didn't have, that the United Nations weapons inspector said they didn't have, but it was a bold decision to violate American national law in the 1973 War Powers Act and the U.S. Constitution, and that was bold. And in fact, there's not a peep out of hardly any members of the House or Senate and the aftermath of this. And that worries me as much as anything, because this just deepens and solidifies the fact that the president of the United States, whether it's Trump or somebody else in the future, has unilateral control of the entire armed forces at his beck and call. He can or she can do whatever they want, and there is no constraints on them. And that is something that could get us into a real war someday.
Yeah. And that's, the irony here is he claims to be this great patriot believing in the Constitution, and yet he completely trashes the Constitution. And, we go out and engage with acts of war without ever having any decision by the American people to go to war.
And then call it peace.
Yeah. But, that goes back to your reference to George Orwell, or it's maybe the predecessor to Orwell was Lewis Carroll and, Alice in Wonderland, where, up and down and going through the looking glass, and, where language is bastardized to the point that it no longer means what it's supposed to mean. It means the exact opposite.
Yeah, or it just means whatever I tell you it means today. And but then people, and this is happening, I guess, well, this is the case at the moment, where there's so many people who are supporters of the administration just willingly disconnect their logic and understanding that the words coming out of their mouth are completely contradicted on the ground. But hey, he said it, so I'm going to go with that until we all end up paying a price. And then I think people are going to wake up. But it's the only way they're going to wake up is if this leads us to some kind of real disaster that has pain for everyday Americans, to include the supporters. And unfortunately, man, when you get to that point, there's going to be some real problems that are going to be hard to overcome. It's not just going to be, get rid of somebody who's in office and voting them out or whatever. This is going to be some real consequence, but it'll have ramifications probably for a generation. I mentioned that, Trump's comment here that this was, Pompeo's comment that this was a bold decision to bomb Iran, even though they didn't have a nuclear weapons program. Yesterday, Tucker Carlson published his interview with the president of Iran. And one of the questions he asked him, and I want to show a couple of things here. He asked him, are you willing to give up your nuclear weapons program?
Would you be willing to give up the nuclear program in exchange for peace?
The truth is that we have never been after developing a nuclear bomb, not in the past, not presently, or in the future, because this is wrong, and this is in contrast to the religious decree or the fatwa, which has been issued by His Eminence, the Supreme Leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, so it is religiously forbidden for us to go after a nuclear bomb.
Now, one of the things Tucker said at the outset before he even showed this is he goes, we're trying to get to the truth. He said, but I don't take anything at face value. He said, I just want to put it out there for you to hear what they have to say. Now, when he claims that they have never in the past had a nuclear weapons program, by all accounts, they did, at least in 2003, and they got rid of it at that point, or they stopped it, and they haven't had it since, according to our own intelligence.
Right.
But what do you make of what the Iranian president had to say there?
Well, he was drawing the distinction between a nuclear weapons program and a nuclear energy program. Iran's not going to abandon their nuclear energy program. And one of the reasons you have your reactors that can enrich uranium is in order to also create fuel for those reactors that are the power plants, because Iran has on the table plans to build several power plants. One of it's going to be used in order to actually desalinate ocean water, take the salt out and use it to irrigate parts of Iran that are pretty dry. Iran, he was his stance was consistent with where he said, look, it's a religious decree by the supreme leader and Khamenei, and we're going to abide by it, because that would be, from our standpoint, it would be a sinful act. It would be wrong. You got to take them at face value with that, because there has been no evidence that they're getting a nuke. And again, it was unfortunate the way Tucker phrased the question, because it implied that they couldn't have a nuclear program at all. Well, unlike Israel, they're signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. And under that treaty, they are allowed to have a nuclear program and to enrich uranium. And yet Israel's the one trying to drive the bus on this, and they're the ones who are not only not signatories to the NPT, they have nuclear weapons, and they refuse to allow any inspections of their nuclear facilities.
And what do you say to those folks who argue that, yeah, but this is different because Iran has this death to Israel thing that they say all the time. If they get nuclear weapons, they would use them. So we have to make sure they don't even have the capacity to reprocess material.
Yeah, how many Israelis have the Iranians killed? They haven't. I'm talking to Israeli leadership. How many Israelis have murdered Iranian officials, scientists, military leaders, political leaders? I mean, Israel's the one that goes out and does the killing of other people. They've assassinated the head of Hezbollah. They've assassinated several of the Hezbollah leaders. They've carried out strikes in Damascus, in Beirut. Iran's not doing that. I mean, this is psychological projection at its worst. And in fact, the Iranians are out in the streets going, "Death to America, death to America." What the hell are American politicians saying about Iran? We don't line up and chant, but we talk about killing them all the time, for God's sake. How about John McCain? Bomb, 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 Iran. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
So, America, look in the damn mirror, you bunch of hypocrites. I mean, I am sick of it. It is, all we do is we spend so much time worrying about everybody else. We don't take care of cleaning our own act up. We're the ones that have killed more Iranian leaders than Iran assassinating Americans. Here's Donald Trump bragging, "I killed Soleimani." And you made the point on your show yesterday where, we get upset. We say, well, the big reason Iran's the number one sponsor of terrorism is because of the support they gave to Iraqi militias that were attacking our soldiers. Well, what the hell are we doing in Ukraine? Okay? If that's the definition of terrorism, United States is the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world. If the definition of terrorism is that you supply insurgent groups, you supply others with weapons that they use to carry out attacks on a government official, then that makes terrorism. United States is number one.
Yeah, that's a painful observation to make, especially when we are Americans. But as you said, we got to look in the mirror sometimes. Actually, we should do it a lot, but we don't ever do it. But hard to argue with anything you just said. I want to go back to that Tucker interview, because one of the ways he came close to ending that was just asking point blank, does Iran actually want peace?
In the war between the United States and Iran, how do you think this will end? How would you like to see it end?
We did not start this war, and we do not want this war to continue in any way. From the very beginning, it was the motto of my administration that I always adhere to, and that was fostering the national unity inside the country, and also fostering peace and tranquility and friendship with the neighboring countries and with the rest of the world.
Now, I think if we're being honest, there's a lot of things that the Iranian regime does it's bad, especially for their people, and they suppress a lot of folks. They torture some people. I've been talking to one recently that a lot of people have been jailed in this big kind of dragnet to try to get anybody who might have had something to do with helping Israel during this. And
you mean like January 6th? I mean, Danny, I'm being dead serious here. We're really good at picking out they're doing this. When they have a natural reaction to having been attacked like that, you look at what we did in this country to the people that went into the Capitol on January 6th, calling them insurrectionists, putting people in prison, and actually torturing some of those. We're in no position to blame and criticize other countries on this. The fact of the matter is, with Iran, they have been under constant attack by us internally. You know, if you look at the number of scientists that were murdered, nuclear physicists that were murdered back in 2012, this wasn't the first time. This has been going on for a while. So, I mean, the Iranians have actually been trying to pursue peace.
Well, and that's where I was wanting to go with this, because my point being that nobody's hands are clean. There's plenty of blame to go around in different areas, whatever. But when you look at the actions that Iran has done, and I'm talking about since 1979, I've not seen any evidence that they are an expansionist power that desires to seeks to either control or conquer any other countries other than to defend their interests, which is why they had these proxies and Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, etc., but to try and project power to deter both the United States and Israel, which were taking all the actions that you're talking about there. Right. So when he asks them, you know, what do you want? Do you want peace? And the president there says, we just want to live in harmony with our neighbors. Is that just him saying whatever that he wants people to hear, or do you think that's true?
Well, it is absolutely true. And again, and you made the point. There's not only since the attack over the Islamic Republic, but Iranians in general, they're not a warlike people that have been going out attacking others. Again, the United States forgets that we're the ones that armed and equipped and encouraged Saddam Hussein, who we also put in power back in the 60s, that or the Ba'ath Party, we encouraged him to invade Iran, which he did. And we helped fund that Iran-Iraq war for 8-9 years. So, you know, and during that period, though, the Iranians sought peace, which is why they were getting ready to sit down with the United States on Sunday, June 15th. And instead, Donald Trump, we've got to go with what he said initially. I knew all about it. I knew the date. So he knew that he was authorizing and approving an Israeli strike, a terrorist attack, a massive terrorist attack on Iran. And he knew about it and didn't stop it. Makes you complicit, makes you an accomplice. So, you know, candidly, Pezeshkian's coming under criticism in Iran for being too weak and too accommodating. That he's still willing to talk to the United States. Are you crazy? There's nothing to talk about anymore. From the standpoint of some of the Iranian hardliners, are saying there's nothing to talk with them about. We're gonna have to arm ourselves and be prepared to defend ourselves against whatever. And where that's going to come out, we'll see. Pezeshkian he's viewed as a weak guy.
So let me ask you this question, and I want to pivot to something else here in just a second, but kind of wrap this section up. This, so-called ceasefire that Trump announced, all three parties, I think you and I have discussed this previously, all three parties had some reason why they wanted the fighting to stop, but none of the underlying conditions and causes have even been addressed, much less solved. Where does this go now?
You mean between Israel,
Iran, and the United States?
Yeah.
And you can throw Gaza in there if you want.
I do not rule out the possibility of a false flag being carried out to be blamed on Iran to justify a renewed attack. But the problem here is, what are we going to do? Israel sort of it gave up the game with its initial attack on June 13th, because none of that was from Israeli aircraft coming in and bombing. Those were through drones that were launched from within the country, as well as trained intelligence groups that carried out attacks on air defense systems, as well as the murdering the key scientists and key military leaders. So if Israel wants to do this again, they're going to have to probably go through Azerbaijan. And again, Azerbaijan was exposed out of this as having been a big collaborator with Israel. So, I think Iran's going to build up. and if they're smart, they will solidify their alliance with Russia and with China, and acquire. They don't. I wouldn't recommend necessarily that they start acquiring combat aircraft from Russia or China, because what are you going to use those for? They've got sufficient defense capabilities.
By the way, on that point there, I wonder your thought on this one. One of the questions that Tucker asked the president of Iran was, he said, if the war restarts, would you get help from China and Russia? And I thought his answer was interesting, because he didn't answer it. He instead said, we don't want to start a war. We want peace and all this kind of stuff, but did not even address China, Russia. Why do you suppose that was?
Well, they've been insistent all along that they can do it themselves, and they maintained. They turned down a defense pact with Russia previously. And
why was that too? Because I actually didn't realize that they had turned it down until just recently.
Because for religious reasons, they felt that if they signed on to that defense pact and to honor it, that if Russia started a war that Iran didn't support, Iran would be in a position of having to support it. And so they didn't want to put themselves in that position. So that's why the language that's in the security agreement that was signed on January 17th, it doesn't get explicit about you have to come to RA to do, but it does leave open the pathways for cooperation and support. Russia has been very clear. They're willing to supply Iran with air defense systems if they need it. And I think Iran now recognizes they need it. But there have been attempts to buy the combat aircraft. And again, I think this whole fixation on 5th generation aircraft, it's like trying to put gold lettering on buggy whips. The buggy whips are great when you're driving horses, but we're in the era of automobiles, and we're now in the era of remotely piloted aircraft. Those are drones, but you can do those with combat aircraft. And it is if you got limited resources, where are you going to spend the money? I'd spend it on air defense.
Right.
And you saw the other day that the Russians, they shot down 15 Storm Shadows with their S-500 system. So it was, you had 15 incoming missiles, took them all out. So, Russia has sort of, they're the leaders in this area, and Iran would be well advised to seek their assistance.
Yeah, and in fact, speaking of that, Gary, were we able to get that other soundbite loaded up there? The one I just sent you a note on. I don't know if you saw that or not. In the last amount of time we have here, if you don't have it, Gary, we'll just roll without it.
I'm disappointed, frankly, that President Putin hasn't stopped. I'm not happy about it either.
On Ukraine, Mr. President, are you planning to send more weapons to Ukraine?
We're going to send some more weapons. We have to. They have to be able to defend themselves. They're getting hit very hard now. They're getting hit very hard. We're going to have to send more weapons. Yeah, defensive weapons primarily, but they're getting hit very, very hard. Very sad. So many people are dying in that mess.
So just a week ago, we announced that an internal audit and analysis within the Pentagon had revealed that our stockpile of interceptor missiles specifically was getting too low. So we had to stop and suspend what we were going to send to Ukraine. That had a big outcry, but the Pentagon came out and defended it and said, nope, that's the right call. This is what America first looks like, Ambassador Whitaker said. And then last night, Trump says, yeah, forget about all that. Okay, we're going to give them something. Why did he do that? And is it going to make any difference?
No, it'll make no difference militarily for Ukraine, but it's probably going to make a difference with Russia, because they're going to, call into question Trump's reliability as a negotiating partner. Frankly, I can't see how the Russians can look at Trump and say, they got in. Some of them got to be saying the guy's crazy. He's not trustworthy. He is all over the map. He says one thing after the other. They just asked him before I got on your show today. I was watching his cabinet meeting, and in that cabinet meeting, someone asked him, said, "Well, why the very question, why did you cut it off last week? Who made that decision? And he wouldn't say who made the decision. He just, this is the decision now. This is the new reality. But it gets back. It does not solve the production problem that the United States has. Like with Patriot missiles, Lockheed Martin produces 550 a year. At least that was the last number that I saw published. Well, when you're using up, say, 200 in one day against an incoming, when Russia's firing 500 drones and missiles, or 500 plus, and if you go on the assumption that each one of those has to be attacked by 2 Patriot missiles, right away you've done 2 years worth of Patriot missiles in just one attack. Okay, so the United States has a significant problem with its production capabilities and the complication and expense. I don't know if you know this, but it was reported, I think, it was either Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal. It takes 2 years to refurbish an M1 Abrams tank. That we're not even talking. So the United States is no longer building brand new tanks from start. It takes, but to refurbish and get them ready for modern combat, they take old ones and spruce them up, but it takes them 2 years. Meanwhile, Russia is building brand new T-90 tanks, 1 a month. So you compare, we can crank out an old M1 Abrams in 2 years, and they're doing 1 a month. That's the problem. But it's not just there. They shot. I think you made the point on your show, or was it Doug McGregor talking to you about the THAAD missiles? The terminal high altitude area defense weapon. That the number we shot, some ungodly number, and the total 13 million a piece. The total was up over $1 billion.
Yeah,
So-
and by the way, I have subsequently, since that episode, I have reached out to somebody that has some connections at the Pentagon. I'll just leave it at that, and says that right now the current number allegedly, this is open source data, I'm told, that we're producing about 600 interceptors per year right now for the Patriot interceptors, but of the THAAD, they said it's like 20 or 30 per year.
Yeah.
They're all this cost. And another thing that has been revealed here recently is that one of the reasons why Trump presumably called an off to this, and why Israel agreed so quickly to it, is because a lot of these systems in the beginning of this so-called 12-day war, some of these systems were quite effective at the beginning, like 95%. But then it said Iran started figuring out how to attack in different ways. And so he said toward the end, it was down to 80%. And this cost is piling up. So they say, wait, we can't have this trend go on here because we're, number one, we don't have that many of these interceptor missiles. We can't have the sophisticated ones, and they're not working as well. So there's that thing going on. And that's not, no one's talking about that publicly, but I assure you, everybody on the planet that matters knows it.
Yeah. And that's, that's the fundamental issue here. What has been, they've exposed the lack of strategic depth on the part of the United States and the rest of NATO in Ukraine. The lessons out of these major wars is that they eat up a lot of resources.
Yeah.
You got to have an ability to resupply, whether we're talking, ammunition for small raw arms or artillery shells or rocket shells. And if you got tanks and armored personnel vehicles running around, great. They got to take fuel. Where are you going to get the fuel? It's not like you just pull up to a regular gas station and gas up. And then these people out in the field, these soldiers, they got to eat, and if in particular, if they're expending a lot of calories a day, if they're not eating, they're going to collapse. So, it's not simple. And then what we discovered is we couldn't keep up with the pace of the artillery shells. We had no idea. Geez, they fire a lot of those. I mean, our weapon systems have been developed more to benefit the contractors that are building it and to keep people employed and the members of Congress happy because they got jobs in their district than actually creating a weapon that makes sense tactically and strategically.
You know, if all we ever do, Larry, is what we've done in the past, I don't know, decade or so, like one-offs in Syria or periodically hitting the Houthis or doing this and what we just did with hitting the 3 sites in Iran and then, you know, calling it a day, you can do that for a long time. But if you get into an actual war, and this is what concerns me, is that our adversaries out there may start to ponder and go, is it worth it to get into? Because there's no doubt that the U.S. can cause a lot of damage to anybody, but because it can't be sustained, that somebody could calculate, we can take them off the board. I mean, what do you think of that?
Well, I think, you know, we keep doing a lot of projection with respect to China, thinking that China is going to they're going to attack and take Taiwan. Whereas who's the one that changed the whole policy there? The United States had agreed with China in 1972 that Taiwan was part of China. Okay, that was the agreement. But now we change it. We change it. And so now we're going to project onto China, oh, they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And China's going to say, look, you already agreed this was part of our country. Okay. And I don't think China is going to actually have to attack militarily, but China is beginning to develop naval capabilities and project military force just because of the threat that we keep presenting. I would simply note, China hasn't, the last country China invaded or sent military forces into was Vietnam in 1979. And if you're a Chinese intelligence analyst or military leader, and you're having to sit back and say, where's the threat in the world? Which country in the world has carried out more military invasions of other countries in the last 45 years? Is it Russia? No. It's only one country. It's us. And you know what? We're a bit like the guy who's known for breaking and entering into homes and then wonders why everybody's afraid of him. He thinks, why are you trying to lock me up? We're the ones, you go down the list. So, you know, and then when countries react to what we're doing, then we accuse them of having, ill intentions, bad intentions. I mean, God, I keep trying to awake the American people to the fact, can't you see this silly game that's being played against us? It's always about, hey, there's that enemy over there. There's that enemy over there. There's that enemy over there. Hey, meanwhile, our cities have turned into trash dumps. I saw a TikTok the other day of this Philadelphia Eagles fan pointing out all this trash on the street. He was retching. He was trying to talk. The stench from the rot was so great. He kept going, ooh, ooh.
Wow.
But it's not there. You see it in Los Angeles. You see it in New York City. You see it in San Francisco. We can't keep our own cities clean, and yet we're going out to police the world. I mean, that was part of what fueled Donald Trump's rise. Americans they're tired of that.
Yeah.
And now here we see Trump going back into the deep state mode.
Yeah, it's very, very discouraging.
Danny, I have some sound bites from the cabinet meeting that Larry was talking about just a little while ago. And this is the one moment in the meeting where Larry, that you had mentioned, where Trump said he didn't know who actually was halting the weapons to Ukraine.
Not treating human beings right. It's killing too many people. So we're sending some defensive weapons to Ukraine, and I've approved that.
So who ordered the pause last week?
I don't know. Why don't you tell me?
I think that's a question.
Yeah.
Just
what did she ask?
She goes, who ordered the pause of the weapons last week?
You tell me.
Yeah, I don't know. You tell me. Yeah, it's just like, you know, this is embarrassing. I mean, Trump, there's something mentally wrong with him. This is not normal. You know, either you're in charge or you're not in charge. and you know what's going on, and you don't know what's going on. And apparently, we're led to believe somebody just made up their mind. Oh yeah, I'm going to cancel. We're not going to send any more. We don't tell the president about it.
Gary, can you imagine if this had been the previous administration and Biden answered that question and said, you tell me, I don't know. I mean, can you imagine what we would have done?
Yeah, it would have proven his dementia. So that's what that would have been. It's also how often does Donald Trump say he doesn't know something? This is also very rare for him to go down that road.
Well,
there's one more moment in the in fact, we actually caught this live at the moment when it happened, where Trump was basically just talking about his relationship with Putin at this moment in time. This is how he describes it.
That was a war that should have never happened, and a lot of people are dying, and it should end. And I don't know, we get a lot of bullshit thrown at us by Putin for you want to know the truth. He's very nice all the time, but it turns out to be meaningless.
He's very nice all the time, but it's BS.
That's where we are. That's our foreign policy right now.
Yeah, and when the Russians listen to that, and would you trust any negotiations with him? I wouldn't. I mean, he's setting us up for look, the Russians aren't going to get mad. They're crushing Ukraine, and Putin has indicated that he fully expects that by next year Russia will be reducing defense expenditures. Why? Because the war will be over by then. And NATO with all of its threats and all of its noise, they can't do anything. They have no military force, no sustainable military force. So it's unfortunate that we got someone like Trump in the position that he is now. And I say that as someone who voted for him. So I've got to take responsibility for that.
And man, we're barely 6 months into the term, so there's a long way to go.
Yeah. This is his behavior is alarming because he's so cavalier about using force and not even thinking through, his moves. He says, if I do this, what are the likely reactions or consequences?
Well, I mean, let's just look at this one right here at hand. By reversing the pause put a week ago, which according to Ambassador Whitaker, to Sean Parnell, and allegedly also to Bridge Colby, it was because of an analysis that was done that said our stockpiles are too low and we can't afford to give any more down because this is what America First looks like, they said.
Yeah.
And now America First doesn't look like that anymore a week later.
Yeah.
So what is it?
Yeah. There's no thought. Again, Trump's a golfer. He's not a chess player. When you play chess, you got to think a move ahead. With golf, man, it's just you hit the ball and I hope you stay in the fairway.
That's such a great point, man. That's so true.
Yeah, that's candidly, golf doesn't require a lot of thought. It just requires.
Larry, better watch where you're going here now.
No. I mean, it's I'm not saying they're stupid.
Put the ball in the hole, man. That's all it takes.
Yeah, put the ball in the hole. That's it.
As fast as you can. That's all you got to think about. Yeah, you don't have to think about what you're going to do on the whole three holes ahead of you. You just got to figure out getting this one in. I think there's a lot to that. It's a really good comparison. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, it's not like when you hit the ball's going to turn around and hit you back. Okay. unless you hit it into a tree and then it ricochets.
Well, then you got that problem. Yeah, can't really talk about that.
Puts a hole in your head. But when you say, hey, we're going to launch these strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, which are protected under the National Non-Proliferation Treaty that they signed, and then they're going to kick out the IAEA. Who could have seen that coming? I mean, for God's sake, it was like, didn't you think this through? Didn't you realize that one of your major sources of intelligence about what Iran's doing with its enriched uranium was through the IAEA? Why jeopardize that? And in fact, I've maintained all along, like one of the reasons Russia doesn't bomb and blow up Iran, Ukraine's military headquarters, their equivalent of the Department of Defense, or their equivalent of the CIA or the NSA, because they have people penetrated there that are working with them.
Mm-hmm.
Why kill them? Why take them out? As long as they've got them there, they have a good insight about what's going on.
You're more valuable alive than dead.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, well, on that cheery note, I guess we'll go ahead and bring us to an end here. But wow, Larry, as always, we really value your observations and commentary and your analytical ability. So thank you for coming on today and really shining a light on this stuff.
All right. Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, guys.
And we appreciate you guys as well. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't. We've got some other great shows coming up the rest of this week, so just stick right here. And if there's any news that's breaking, like we always do, we're going to bring you whatever happens when it does. Also, as a reminder, we are on podcasts, because I know a lot of people like to get their information from podcasts. They don't have time for the videos. Just go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podcast Addict, and you will find us waiting there for you. Type in Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and you will get us on podcasts. Spread that to your friends as well, because I know a lot of them like to do that. Thank you very much for being with us today. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive.